I just spent a week learning how to speedrun Super Mario Odyssey to find out just how fast someone with no speedrunning experience could beat it. Here's how it went. Since its release in 2017, Super Mario Odyssey has had an incredibly strong speedrunning community, with a number of prominent runners locked into a seemingly unending battle for the #1 spot and eventually the world's first sub-hour run. The community thrived, making this an incredibly popular game to speedrun. While the pros are absolutely impressive, how fast can your average guy with a pretty minimal amount of speedrunning experience beat this game? That's what I wanted to find out. With the experience of only playing through this game one time when I first bought my Switch back in 2019, how fast could I beat it after just a week of practicing the modern speedrunning techniques and movement? So I headed over to Twitch to go live and get to the bottom of this question. The first order of business was to figure out exactly what a proper speedrun even looked like. And luckily, there are a ton of resources out there for helping beginners like myself get into speedrunning this game. I chose to use Small Ant's beginner speedrun guide playlist, which I have linked in the description, but there are a ton of other great guides out there for players at every level. To start this journey, I decided to check all of those guides out on stream so I could get a feel for the route and then play alongside so I could start building some muscle memory as well. And I found this approach to be really helpful, but it was also instantly clear how much I needed to learn about even the basic movements in this game. The video tutorials really made me appreciate just how good speedrunners are and how easy they make such complex movements look. But for me, it meant that I would really need to just focus on the basics, understand that I was a beginner and what I was watching was the work of seasoned veterans, and it was okay to make mistakes because that was the whole point of this first stream.
That's the end of the guide for these two kingdoms. There is something that I feel you should keep in mind while learning and doing runs. Since you are just starting out, you will make a lot of mistakes. Everyone does at the beginning, and it's important to remember this.
Remember that, chat. Remember those words. During this playthrough, I wanted to understand where the gaps in my game were, and there were plenty of them, and just get a feeling for how to navigate through the game. This first stream, I spent over 5 hours just beating each kingdom after watching a video of the proper beginner route, but toward the end of my stream, I was just watching the route without playing each one to save some time. And while that I felt that I understood the route pretty decently, not playing alongside this guide for the last couple kingdoms proved to be a very poor decision when it came time to actually run them, but we'll get to all of that in a bit. After this stream, I was feeling quite humbled, but also excited to get a first run down to see exactly where I landed. I was feeling pretty confident about some critical movements like the cap dive and rolling around the map just compared to running. There was still such a long way to go, but I was feeling pretty ready for my first run in the next stream. Starting off the day, my only idea in mind was to finish a complete run. I didn't care how fast or slow I went, I just wanted to get a feel for where I stood with this speed run. From the start, I had the right path, but fumbled the first attempt at the T-Rex skip and lost some valuable time just waiting for it to respawn. Luckily, I nailed it on the second try and just got through the rest of the Cascade Kingdom pretty swiftly. The next hurdle was in the Sand Kingdom though, where I failed a number of jumps out of the bullet bills, which cost me valuable minutes with resets and getting back to the correct platforms. Moving forward to the Lake Kingdom, I took way too long to make this jump up to the platform for the Brutal Fight, which I also then failed several times before being able to move on. And while there were no incredibly bad aspects of Wooded Kingdom, there was a ton of sloppy play and mistakes that cost me a bit of time here and there. Is there supposed to be a waterfall over here somewhere? All just adding up for a huge potential time save down the line. And then Lost Kingdom is where things really started to fall apart. From a couple of tricky jumps to just continuous mistakes in the middle game, I could really feel myself slowing down at this part. Checkpoint. I'm gonna just take this checkpoint. It might be a little bit dumb. Oh, that hurts, man. That causes me a lot of pain. That hurts. And to end it all off, I accidentally triggered the Cappy cutscene and failed the very last jump a number of times, leading to several deaths. I did manage to finally get out of the Lost Kingdom over 12 minutes later, but now face the longest kingdom yet, Metro Kingdom. After an incredibly strong start... Oh, what the fuck just happened? Things really didn't get better for me. I struggled a lot on the early jumps and again found it so difficult to just get through the first couple moons. On the bright side, I did manage to make a couple of tough jumps that I'd struggled with in practice. And once the electric caterpillar was defeated, I started to settle back in, and aside from swinging from these random poles, am I that ass at this game, dude? Holy. The rest of Metro actually went pretty well. And that momentum continued into Seaside Kingdom, where I managed to get through the middle really well after struggling with an early jump. But it also turns out that I skipped a moon in the cave and had to scramble around looking for just one final random moon to close out the kingdom. Snow Kingdom ended up just being a big old mess of mid, where I made some decent plays, but also constantly shot myself in the foot with foolish mistakes, missed jumps, and additional attempts at tech that I really hadn't perfected. Luckily for me, it was still one of the shortest kingdoms, and I was moving on to the next big hurdle, the Luncheon Kingdom. During my initial practice, Luncheon Kingdom marked the end of me playing the game alongside the tutorials, and I had transitioned to just watching the tutorials around this time, abandoning my playthrough for the sake of save time.
I'm mostly in the learning phase now. I was getting a little bit frustrated and just kind of getting owned by the game at one point. So I'm taking, I think, the rest of the stream to just watch everything, figure out how this run works. I will actually run this through to get a time.
So from here on out, I was far less confident with the route than I had been previously. And that showed almost instantly as I missed a few early moons that would cost me a ton of time down the road as I had to backtrack and look up locations for moons to complete this kingdom.
I'm going to go back because I think I might have missed a moon. Not actually sure.
While I nailed the parts of this kingdom that I could remember, it was clear that my luncheon needed a lot of cleaning up before it was going to get to a point where I felt confident. And aside from an early death, Ruin Kingdom was pretty standard, but now it was time for things to really fall apart at Bowser's Kingdom. My memory of this kingdom was already pretty bad, and while I managed to trek through it slowly but surely, I hit a complete skid when I got to the brutal battles. I failed both battles several times, losing a solid chunk of time with some even more difficult battles and jumps coming up. At this point, the only objective was to just hang on for the ride and to see if I could get across the finish line. I died late in my first attempt at the mech fight, but managed to sneak through on a second one. And now it was just the Moon Kingdom standing in the way of me completing my first ever run. After falling off a ledge almost instantly, I made my way over to the final difficult move of the game, the Moon Skip.
We get to do potentially the biggest skip in the entire game.
Well, this notorious skip is an integral part of the speedrun. I actually hadn't practiced it at all. In my only ever save of Odyssey, I had already talked to the Sphinx, so I couldn't practice it on that save, and I had just never taken the time to get another save file all the way there. That, combined with a little bit of arrogance in the form of, hey, I'm a pretty smart guy, I should be able to figure this out from watching a video once or twice, led to my eventual downfall. While a sub 245 run was still certainly on the table, after 20 straight minutes of failing this jump and with no prospects on the horizon, I unfortunately had to just end my stream to make it to another commitment I had, failing my first run mere minutes from the end.
No, I'm just bugging. All right. That, unfortunately, is where the speedrun kills me.
While I was incredibly disappointed to fail the run so close to the finish, the fire I felt for this game was still in me, and I knew I would just have to practice and tackle it in another stream. Following an incredibly disappointing end to the last run, I was determined to finish a run today. I didn't have any set time goal in mind, I just wanted to actually finish a run this time. After practicing the moon skip, the end game, and some other jumps at the beginning of stream, it was time to get this new run underway, and to say things got off to a rough start would be an understatement. We're starting over. That's unreal. Right off the bat, I rolled off the edge, so I opted to restart, and after failing the first brutal fight in the run after that, I was already on my third run of the day, mere minutes into the speed run. While I did just want to get a time on the board, I was at a point where I felt good enough to at least restart a couple of times in the early game if I was failing really simple maneuvers that I knew I was capable of doing. Luckily though, the third run started a whole lot better. This time around, I breezed through the Cap and Cascade Kingdoms without any trouble and finally got off to a decent start. The Sand Kingdom actually got off to a good start too, but it wasn't until the first ice jump that I really had any problems. But after a few missed attempts, it was back to business as usual, and I continued my way across the desert. I managed to hit the first bullet bill jump on my first try, which was huge, but then lost some time along the way with some small mistakes and missteps. I grabbed the next couple moons before meeting my first huge time loss of this run. I spent almost 4 straight minutes just trying to get to the Jaxi Ruins moon, and for some reason this jump was really tricking me, and I just could not seem to figure out what was going wrong when I got to this point.
I'm just literally hitting random buttons, dude. I'm trying to act too much off of instinct when I don't have the instincts yet.
I was pretty frustrated having lost so much time, but seeing as how this was the last difficult jump in the kingdom, I decided not to reset and to just get the last few moons as quickly as possible. With the final moons collected, I could teleport back to the Odyssey and leave the dreaded Sand Kingdom. And it's at this point where I wish I could tell you that things got better. But you know what they say, sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. While most of the Lake Kingdom was actually fine, the jump up to the brutal fight and the boss fight itself both cost me some valuable time, but overall this kingdom is really straightforward and I played the rest of it pretty smoothly. But with with that, we move on to the Wooded Kingdom. And this is where my patience was truly tested. Funny enough, Wooded Kingdom actually started off really well, hitting the rabbit on my first try, and besides forgetting the location of a singular waterfall, I was doing all right. Then perhaps the second worst mishap of this run occurred. While trying to get a moon using the plants, I rolled off the platform down to an area that wouldn't let me get back up.
Oh, that's really bad. I actually need to not do that.
Well, I could have just teleported back to the Odyssey and run back to that point. In my mind at the time, the only way to correct this mistake was to have Mario roll off the edge and die, so the game might teleport me back up to where I needed to be. It turns out that this move, in fact, proved to be an even worse mistake.
Oh no, I made such... this is such a bad...
Instead of just falling to my death and resetting, there are certain areas of the Wooded Kingdom where that isn't the case. Instead, you end up in a place that is far worse. The deep woods. And while I could explain how I was feeling, I think this clip sums it up perfectly.
What the fuck is going on, dude? I might actually just have to reset. This is crazy.
The deep woods requires you to grow a plant to get back to the main area of the map, and I only learned this after running around completely clueless for about 3 minutes, but once I escaped, I was right back at the spawn point, allowing me to right my previous error. I got back to the area and the platform and was just so shocked by my previous mistakes that I kept making small errors, failing to get this moon. Then, almost 5 minutes after first arriving at the moon, I was finally able to claim it and move on. From this point on, I would consider the rest of Wooded Kingdom a controlled skid where I was still making small errors and missing jumps here and there, but nothing compared to the gravity of the meltdown I had experienced to start this kingdom. So with the Brutal defeated and all moons collected, I could escape the hell that was the Wooded Kingdom and move on, hoping to recover and get back into my groove. But unfortunately for me, the path to redemption went through the Lost Kingdom. I know I'm skipping over the Cloud Kingdom, but honestly, this boss fight went alright. Lost Kingdom, however, felt like an extension of the torture that was the Wooded Kingdom, as I continually failed the first jump a number of times before making it across the gap to get the kingdom started. Luckily, from there, I did alright collecting moons and made the incredibly wise decision to take a checkpoint on the other side of the map. From here, I was able to grab the other moons, free from the worry that a death would send me all the way back to the beginning. I used that to my advantage a couple of times, falling in the purple lava while missing jumps, but honestly, compared to previous runs, this wasn't going all that poorly. I did again forget to avoid the cutscene, so I had to deal with grabbing Cappy again in the final 2 moons before heading on my way to Metro Kingdom. At this point, anything seemed better than the current path I had been on. While I really didn't have a wonderful start to the run, it was in mind that beating my original goal of a 2 to 2.5 hour run was somehow still on the table. I just needed to clean up a few things and avoid making such devastating mistakes moving forward. While Night Metro is usually a real toss-up for me, it started off about as well as I could have hoped for in this run. I did miss a few jumps here and there, but I recovered really well and made good progress through the early section. I did have trouble at the top of City Hall on some of the poles, but nailing the big jump across the gap meant that I wouldn't have to do any of it all over again.
Okay, you can say I lost the sauce if I mess up this next jump. If I get the next jump, not all sauce is lost. Okay, I haven't lost all the sauce yet.
Though it did require a third phase, the weird electric bug boss fight went pretty well and smoothly, and finally, the sun was up in the Metro Kingdom. Despite the high volume of moons, the Metro Kingdom was actually one of the more enjoyable ones in this run. It's incredibly straightforward, and there aren't super difficult jumps that require a ton of precision, making it really easy to cruise through. Of course, I bonked and missed a few jumps anyways, but I made it up to myself with plays like this.
Okay, and then right about, we're gonna guess there. Oh, let's go, Chad. That's so huge. That's so clutch. That's not. That's...
The rest of Metro Kingdom, though, played out nicely, and I was able to move on now just over an hour into the run. After some brief indecision because I couldn't remember how many coins I had, it was off to the Seaside Kingdom next. Well, Seaside Kingdom can be completed in just a few minutes by seasoned pros. It has a couple of deceivingly difficult jumps to the inexperienced player such as myself. And right away, I made Mario bonk so many times that I'm not even really sure how he was able to remain upright for the rest of this run. But from there, I grabbed the easiest moon before completing another rough jump, but luckily this took far less time than the first one did. From here, the rest of Seaside Kingdom was actually really easy, and I remembered all the locations for the moons this time, so I was able to head on to the Snow Kingdom only a few minutes later. The Snow Kingdom started off easy, and perhaps the most difficult jump in the entire kingdom only took me a few tries, so I was feeling pretty good. The first puzzle area always causes me a bit of trouble, but I managed to use an alternate, albeit slower route to grab the main moon before blowing the turtles and collecting the final moon. The second area is usually fine, but this time around I made a point of playing it safe here.
And I'm gonna avoid doing the crazy jumps here just because it's really easy to fall off the edge. So I'm just gonna... I don't even know why I say anything during these runs, man. It should be 2 hours of just dead silence. Following that colossal failure, I made it out of the rest of Snow Kingdom and set my sights on the Luncheon Kingdom. The previous two kingdoms went incredibly fast, and I was hoping to keep up this pace when I landed in Luncheon Kingdom. Unfortunately for me, that just wasn't in the cards. This kingdom features a ton of tricky jumps if you're still learning a lot of the movement mechanics, and it seemed that I was doomed to struggle on each of them. The first salt jump took me numerous attempts, and several other jumps later in the run just didn't seem to go my way. Add that to the fact that Mario was hell-bent on throwing the golden onion everywhere but inside the soup, and things were just about ready to fall apart at the seams in this kingdom. Mario's just apparently too heavy off the steroids, throwing the thing too damn far. What's gotten into him? I made a grave mistake accidentally clipping into a platform while I was a fireball, costing me a life and a quick reset, but I just kept brute forcing my way through this kingdom as fast as I could given my relatively poor gameplay. With a few more deaths, I managed to will my way to the end and move on to the final big hurdle. After a brief intermission spent fighting a dragon boss that I somehow always forget is in this game, it was time for Bowser's Kingdom. I still felt pretty unclear about what the best route was, but I knew I just needed to scramble to the top as fast as I could if I had any interest in getting what now seemed like a potential sub 2 hour run. I just grabbed what moons I could remember, but even doing some of the simplest tasks, I managed to find a way to throw. Luckily, the game saved my progress and I was able to continue on my way shortly after, but now it was time for a huge moment in Bowser's Kingdom. The two brutal fights. These absolutely kicked my ass in the last run, and even though I knew it could cost me valuable time, I took these battles very slow and didn't try any crazy trick. And this turned out to be the best possible decision as I got through both fights on my first try. It may not have been as fast as possible, but it was a huge time save over resetting. I think I died 2 or 3 times in that boss fight last time, so once again, really good to just get through it like that. With those out of the way, it was time for the next big battle. The mech. And for this, I went in with the same approach as the previous fights. Just take it slow and get it right on the first try. And I actually did manage to pull off a pretty impressive move staying on the mech after the first run of the fight. I was too slow to attack and just resorted to doing the rest of the fight normally. I stuck to the plan, took out the mech, and now had just about 10 minutes to get through the end of the game if I wanted to crack a sub 2 hour run. It was time to lock in and close out. And what better way than to first try nail the very jump that had caused me to fail my first run. Practice paid off. Practice paid off. Let's go. That's huge. This was a huge boost of confidence that I carried forward. In the ensuing Bowser's boss fight, I had finally nailed the hat timing, leading to some good time saves. And with chat's encouragement, I finally acknowledged the possibility of this run going sub 2 hours. But it's going to be close. If I can play this really, really well, maybe. With Bowser defeated, there was only one final section standing in my way. I was feeling great, knowing that I had run through this section at the beginning of stream and nailing the couple of jumps that I was worried about in the 2D section. Once I had completed that, I was in the final room and I knew it was looking good. But right now, you might also be wondering. He said earlier that Wooded Kingdom was his second biggest mistake in this run, but he never mentioned what the biggest mistake was. And to that I say, you'll understand once you've watched what happens next. With all 4 pillars destroyed in this room, it was time to seal my fate in my sub 2 hour run. There we go. Just go to the middle. No! No, dude, no! 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 Chat, no! No, dude, that was sub 2. And it sets us all the way back. Dude, no. That is gonna haunt me. That is going to fucking haunt me. After all the struggles I overcame in this run, it was one of the most simple jumps in the entire game that ended up costing me. Despite my best efforts to race back, it just wasn't quite enough to sneak in under sub 2 hours, ending with a final time of 2 hours and 16 minutes. Just one critical error from breaking 2. While it was a great run, I was incredibly frustrated with the end of this run, and instantly a new goal had been created in my mind. Break sub 2, but don't let it come down to just one final jump. If I was going to break 2 hours, I wanted to be absolutely sure. To make good on this promise, I spent the last hour of stream going over a ton of the jumps that had troubled me in this run, and it was a super productive practice session. But I knew I needed to keep at it if I really wanted to break sub 2 in the next run,
So I decided to also do some offline practice. Offline, I spent about an hour just jumping across kingdoms and refining different techniques and jumps that had troubled me in my first 2 attempts. Regardless of how big or small, I refined these jumps and followed a simple practice methodology of hitting a particular jump 3 times in a row before moving on. This way, I knew that I would be ready for them when it came time to make these jumps for real in a run. And for some of the kingdoms, I just rewatched videos on the correct movements. Others, I just continued to make the jump over and over again to commit everything to muscle memory. While I was a little skeptical of all of this without the context of it being within a speedrun, I felt my confidence really boost during this session and could feel the pieces coming together for a sub 2 hour run. I knew the movements would still be tricky, but after breaking them down and repeating them, I felt good for the next run. Now it was finally time for the run back. After practicing and honing my skills a lot, it was time to show everything I had learned in the past 7 days. The goal today was to break 2 hours. After the tragic end of last run, I knew that I needed to nail this run to prove to myself that I really had improved and learned from the time that I had put in practicing. I spent about the first half an hour of stream rewatching the Bowser's Castle section of the run and practicing some jumps that I had struggled with at different points just to warm up and lock in. And finally, with a lot of nerves and excitement, it was time to get this run underway. Okay, chat. The time has come. Sub 2 hour, breaking 2. This is it. We got the next 2 hours to prove, show what I've learned, and get this. Let's do it. My plan for this run was to keep things pretty safe. Knowing that I was only 16 seconds away from sub 2 last time, I knew that I could easily get under it if I just didn't take huge risks or try to play beyond my skill level. Moving through Cap Kingdom though, I already felt the slight improvements, and without really doing anything except playing more of the game recently, I had already made a simple 5-second improvement. Perfect. Easy breezy. And next up was Cascade Kingdom, the first real opportunity to start shaving off time. While I had some rough moments right at the beginning, I really made up for it by hitting the T-Rex skip on my first try and having a really good brutal fight. From there, I made one last jump up to the final moon and headed back to the Odyssey, taking off for Sand Kingdom already a full minute ahead of my previous run. Sand Kingdom had been the target of a lot of my practice between last stream and this stream. While there were only 1 or 2 difficult jumps in the route I was using, failing either of them could cost me upwards of a minute per attempt, so I worked a lot to ensure that I could hit them both more consistently. The kingdom started off a bit like the last with some foolish minor mistakes, but hitting the difficult jumps that I needed in order to really save time. With the first bullet bill jump out of the way and most of the kingdom cleaned up from that point, it was time for the jump that had given me the most difficulty in this kingdom. This second jump requires you to drive a bullet bill straight into a very particular section of this wall and then jump up to the chest containing this moon. The problem for me was Mario will only wall slide on this very slim portion, and if you're not lucky or you just mess up the timing, he bonks right off the wall, falling to his death. And despite a lot of practicing, that's exactly what happened in this run. Luckily with this jump, there is a checkpoint right before it to save time when you respawn, but it is still costly not getting this on the first attempt. And to dig the hole even deeper, I failed it on the second attempt too. This was the first point in the run where I really felt my nerves coming into play, and I knew that I just needed to get past this section to close out the kingdom and rebuild some of the confidence that I had felt slowly slipping away. What I'm talking about, I just need, like, mentally, this is where the mental toughness has to come in. The third time proved to be the charm, nailing the jump and setting me on my way to move on to the next kingdom. Despite some of these errors, I had bolstered my lead to almost 5 minutes now over my past run, reassuring me that the practice was clearly paying off and would continue to pay dividends down the stretch. And to continue the confidence building, I entered the Lake Kingdom. Lake Kingdom is probably the easiest kingdom in the entire game, with only the one moderately difficult jump. I wanted to have a really clean Lake Kingdom this time around to get ready for the upcoming kingdoms, each of which had caused me different problems in my past runs. And Lake Kingdom started off just like I wanted. I got through the beginning stretch really well and was gearing up for the only tough jump. My plan was to give it one attempt, and if I failed, I had an alternate route that would add about 30 to 45 seconds instead of trying again. I jumped out of the water and actually nailed this jump, but I hit the wrong button and ground pounded back into the water instead of rolling onto the platform. It bothered me knowing that I was so close to hitting this jump and saving a bunch of time, but I had the alternate route and I used that to get to the brutal fight. Luckily, I did make up for some lost time here by beating the fight on the first try, and while I didn't use any speedy strats, it still accounted for another 40 seconds of time save, which is solid considering this is one of the shortest kingdoms. But to follow that up, it was time to pivot to one of the longest. the Wooded Kingdom. This kingdom had accounted for my biggest time loss in the last run, and I really hoped that just by avoiding simple mistakes, I could see some major time saved. While I can't act like it got off to a great start, I quickly got to work gathering moons as fast as I could. I made up for how poorly the last run went by breezing through the middle of the Wooded Kingdom, really avoiding mistakes and just consistently nailing movements to get through quickly. All that stood in my way was the easiest Brutal fight, which went perfectly, and I was on to the next kingdom with now over a 10-minute lead on my previous run. That was a really good Wooded Kingdom, chat. That was a really good Wooded Kingdom. But with Lost Kingdom on the horizon, I still wasn't convinced that this was the run. Lost Kingdom doesn't have a ton of moons compared to Wooded or Metro, but it features a ton of tricky jumps with huge potential setbacks if you fail. But my goal remained the same: avoid foolish mistakes that had cost me a ton of time in the past and stay focused even if things didn't go exactly to plan. With that in mind, the beginning of the kingdom went really well. I hit a number of tricky jumps that had killed my momentum in previous runs, and it wasn't until the second to last moon that I made my first error. Somehow at this point, I still hadn't figured out how to avoid the Cappy event, so that did set me back about a minute, having to climb all the way back up to retrieve Cappy. Not only did I roll off the top of this platform, I also then accidentally ground pounded right into the poison, causing me to respawn. But luckily, this was right by where I needed to finish the event, so once that was done, I headed down and grabbed the second to last moon. Once that was done, it was time for the final fateful jump. Either way, you die making this jump, but usually you would hope to grab the moon before falling to your inevitable death. While that all sounds simple, I managed to dive in the complete opposite direction, warranting yet another reset, but luckily I got it on the second time around and was finally on my way out of the Lost Kingdom. While it certainly wasn't pretty, it was still good enough to shave off another minute, perhaps proving just how poorly this kingdom had been in each of my runs before this. With that in the rearview mirror, it was time for the Metro Kingdom. With some bumps and some bruises, but not all is lost, if you will. I hate that I said that. Like I said, the rest of Metro is actually pretty enjoyable, but the Night Metro section of this is always difficult, and it at certain points had become my own personal hell while training for this speedrun. There are a ton of tricky stunts that I really hadn't been able to nail down despite my best efforts to practice them consistently, and I struggled getting up to the roof, but once I got to that point, things started rolling. I got the first moon and then headed across to my least favorite place in all of Night Metro, the City Hall rooftop. There are so many subtle difficulties in this room, and they can really cost you a lot of time if you're not careful. I struggled again on the beams for some reason, but then it was time for the huge jump. I never mentioned this before, but since you're against the wall, you just have to jump toward the camera, and the angle is really strange, and you're pretty much just at the mercy of Mario's own volition for this maneuver. Luckily, Mario cooperated, hitting the cap jump, and I barely managed to sneak across this gap instead of plummeting back to the bottom, losing vital minutes. Once I was there, took on the boss fight. That actually went pretty well, and finally, it was sunup in New Donk City. I really started to settle into this part of the run where I had practiced the routing quite a bit, and I was able to just get to work. Without anything super noticeable, I cruised through the rest of the entire kingdom and set off for the Seaside Kingdom. I think we'll just go to Seaside to stick with tradition here. Or I guess we're going to the Snow Kingdom instead. This actually doesn't matter at all since I had enough coins to buy the Moon and Snow Kingdom, but it could have been devastating if I wasn't careful. There was only the one jump I was worried about, and it actually went pretty well. I don't know how the hell I pulled that off, but we got there. I started checking off areas one by one, but had a slight slip up when I killed a Goomba on accident. And since it didn't respawn, I did have to run off the edge to restart. But looking back, this was a pretty smart move. It didn't cost a lot of time and it helped me get right back on track. From there, I just had to grab one more moon and we could actually head to Seaside Kingdom for real this time. While I mentioned it's not a particularly difficult kingdom, Seaside Kingdom was actually a target of a huge chunk of my practice. There are just a few small jumps that had cost me a lot of time in past runs, and forgetting a moon previously had led to some scrambling in the past. But since then, I felt I had really locked in and felt good about this one. And right after touching down, it showed as I nailed a couple of jumps that had really stumped me in the past, allowing me to cruise through the middle and later part of this kingdom. And only 4 minutes after getting there, I was on my way out, now with a 15-minute lead on my last run and another huge potential time save on the horizon. While Luncheon Kingdom was where things really started to crumble a bit in my previous run, I had nailed down the route and there were a ton of jumps that I had practiced in the meantime. With just these small improvements and a bit of practice, I felt so much more comfortable with this section. I nailed the first couple jumps. I did forget one, and that cost me a little bit of time. I want James to be... Oh, I realized that there's not a moon here. Oh, and I did the wrong jump. Yeah, it's going to cost me a lot. It's going to cost me a lot. But from there, things really settled down again. I knocked out the next chunk of moons in just a couple of minutes, but I did lose a little bit of time as I clipped on a pole and fell to my death in the lava. Luckily, I was able to get right back into it and nail some of the other jumps that had plagued me in the past. By nailing these jumps on my first or second try this time around, I was shaving off some serious time, and with the final triple moon collected, I was out of the Luncheon Kingdom, jumping all the way to over 20 minutes ahead of the last run. And it was at this point that I truly began to acknowledge that sub 2 or even a bit below that was really in the cards if I just kept it together through the next 3 sections. To be fair, Ruined Kingdom is pretty mundane in the scheme of this run, and by avoiding any deaths, I was able to just skate on by and head to Bowser's Kingdom, which that is what I considered the last true hurdle in this run. Like I mentioned, I started off my stream by watching Bowser's Kingdom, so I was feeling a lot better about this than I had before. I didn't really practice it a whole lot because the kingdom is so different after beating the game and I didn't have a fresh save. I did bobble my way through the beginning, and despite knowing the route a lot better, I had some small mistakes that added up to some time lost here and there. With that aside, I fought my way all the way up to the brutal fights where things started to slide. The first fight should have been easy. I've nailed this one before in past runs, but I certainly felt the pressure mounting here. I was making foolish mistakes, and instead of taking my time to get through clean, I ended up taking 2 deaths to get through it. From there, it was off to the other brutal fight. And while I normally struggled with this one more, I actually did a decent job and managed to hang on with just 1 health to clutch the fight and get out of there as fast as possible. I was a little shaken up knowing that I had cost myself some time on what was shaping up to be a great run, but I just had to put that out of my head before the next fight. While I tried to regain my focus on the next section, I continued to just fumble certain movements, only increasing the pressure that I was putting on myself to get through the rest of this run quickly. I did get lucky and have a really clean mech fight, only costing myself a few minutes since I hadn't quite mastered the fastest strat, but I was finally regaining confidence heading into the final kingdom. The Moon Kingdom is actually incredibly straightforward, but considering the fact that it had ended my first run, it had always stuck in the back of my mind as something to be very cautious of. And it was also at this point in the run that I remembered I didn't warm up on the moon skip at all before starting this run, so I just had to rely on pure muscle memory here. And while I did nail it the first time in the last run, I had still struggled with this jump a lot when I practiced it. So I geared up for what could be a very painful couple of minutes, but I locked in and nailed the moon skip on my first try, perhaps serving as a great representation of the progress I had made since first running this game a week ago.
So I'm starting to feel my heartbeat. Starting to feel my heartbeat, chat, but we get through.
From there, I launched myself into the church to break up a wedding, heading into the Bowser boss fight. The boss fight went really well as I managed to nail the maneuver, bringing the hat over at just the right time and knocking out Bowser quickly. With Bowser down, I could see my chat's excitement growing and felt my own excitement knowing that I was just minutes away from a massive PB. But what remained was perhaps the most haunting section.
All right, chat. We've been here before, twice. The world falling around us, trying to get us to plummet to our doom, which we've done.
I had fumbled my chance at a sub 2 hour run in the last possible section of my last run, and that really scared me this time around. While it was actually really simple, the fact that I couldn't practice it at all was really concerning to me. And I knew I would hate to lose more time on a personal best run making the same mistake again. But I had to push out those thoughts, ignore the fear, and just nail this section to cement my incredible progress in this run. And just about a minute later, I had reached the final room.
Final boss fight room right here. This is where it all fell apart last time, chat. This is where it fell apart last time. My hands are sweaty as fuck.
I knocked out each pillar, inching closer and closer to that personal best. And with the last pillar down, all I had to do again was get to the middle.
Okay, that literal corner right there is where I died last time. But we make it through. And right there, chat, with that, we get 137.46. Oh my god. 23 plus minutes off of my personal best time. Whew. That feels good.
And just 1 week later, I landed a sub 140 run, taking over 22 minutes off my personal best run from just days before and ending with a time that I was incredibly proud of.
1 week later, just 1 week ago, it was a fail at moon skip, and now we're here with a confident sub 2, a sub 140 even, which is so awesome. And perhaps that is where this story ends. But there's also a chance, if you guys like this enough, there's a chance that that is not where it ends and we keep going.
While I was incredibly disappointed to get just over 2 hours in my first ever run, this was actually the best case scenario. Had I gone sub 2, I'm not really sure I would have run the game back, and nor would I have been able to see myself improve nearly as much as I did. Again, I can't express how happy I am with this time and how thankful I am for all the support from my chat, from existing members to new people who just showed up during stream to wish me good luck. This was such a fun challenge to take on, and I'm so happy that I was able to show off so much of what I learned over the course of just 1 week. If you want to check out challenges like this and the other stuff that I do live, make sure to follow me over on Twitch at I'mJamesLive_, which will be also linked in the description. Make sure to let me know in the comments of this video if you want me to continue working on this speedrun or other challenges in Super Mario Odyssey, because if you guys want to see it, I'm up to make way more content on this game because I had so much fun. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and if you wouldn't mind dropping a like and commenting, that would be incredible as it helps the video out a ton. With all that said, I want to thank you all again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.